The Lama Port, South Sudan-Ethiopia transport corridor received a major boost from the African Union after it was endorsed and adopted by the organization because of its social as well as economic impact on the continent. But that was before the coronavirus happened. What is the progress so far? How has it been impacted by the pandemic? Joining us on Inside Government is Sylvester Kasuku. He's the Chief Executive Officer of lapset. Here we are living in the era of coronavirus. And before that, insecurity was also a major concern for the contractor. And this would be described as a perfect storm for lapset.
Yes, thank you very much, OBrien. We are so far doing very well with regard to the delivery of the lapset corridor program. That is the projects being championed under the lapset corridor program. And these are 7 key infrastructural projects. To begin with, Lama Port, together with an adjoined industrial city that has been planned next to it, or what you can also call a special economic zone. We also have highways, railways, pipelines, resort cities, airports, as well as a refinery that has been planned for Lamu. And throughout the corridor, we realized that these key infrastructural components, particularly the line infrastructure, the line transport infrastructure components, like railways, roads, are the ones that are connecting Lama Port through northern Kenya with our neighboring countries of Ethiopia and South Sudan. These are the key infrastructural components that are also establishing what we are calling the land bridge across the African continent. The other infrastructures that I've mentioned, particularly the crude oil pipeline, is meant to bring crude oil from Turkana area, among many other future prospective areas, taking the oil to Lama Port. We also have the product oil pipeline, or what we call the clean fuels pipeline, that is meant to bring oil or to take oil from Lama Port to northern Kenya and to the neighboring countries of Ethiopia and any other that we will be serving. With regard to the implementation status, we are currently constructing the first 3 berths of Lama Port. And the good news, albeit the Covid-19 situation, is that we have already completed the first berth of Lama Port. And
last year, actually.
Yes,
before the pandemic.
Yes, late last year. And what you do realize with the construction of ports is that even after you've already completed the major civil works on a reclaimed or a port that has been built through reclamation, there is a need for it to settle down. So it is also, this situation is also coinciding with the level of settling of that particular berth, because the materials have been sucked from the bottom of the sea and have been used to establish the structure there, particularly the yard area. So that settling is taking place very well. And with regard to the other 2 berths that are remaining, because we are putting up 3, we are still undertaking construction activities at the Lama Port site. And of course, you will be asking me why and how are you undertaking construction works in this particular COVID-19 situation. What happened is that we did lock the site immediately the COVID issue came up, and when it was required that we needed to start to take care. And at that point in time, around March, we realized that Lama Port was still a COVID-free zone. So there was no need of waiting to have a mess taking place, then we start to take action. So instead we became proactive as government, and we locked the site to make sure that there was no further access to the port side by people coming from outside the port. And as such, the workers who are resident at the port site are going on with their work, and external accesses is not allowed. However, if somebody needs to go out of the port site, then they are not allowed to come back, because once they go to mix with the other population whose status we are not sure about and whose conditions we cannot control, then they have to wait for the time when the COVID issue will have been resolved, or when it can be ascertained that people from outside can join the port site without necessarily contaminating the other people in there. So works are ongoing, and currently we are at about 60% completion rate for the remaining 2 baths, with the first bath already completed at 100% completion rate. So we are making good progress.
Coming back, to the issue of the first and the second and the third bath, but even before coronavirus happened, I mean, there was a major attack, terror attack, nearby, Manda area. And the contractor suspended operations until the situation was expected to normalize. And before even the dust settled, then the pandemic came knocking. How has these two impacted, number one, on delivery, and number two, on cost implication?
Fine, there was an attack, but that attack did not mean that the government ceased to exist. The security forces are still in place.
But the contractor stopped first of all?
Yes, that stopping was a short stopgap, considering that the environment was more or less similar, if you are to talk about security issues. And it was important to sterilize that environment, to sterilize it from threats. And that process of sterilization is a security operation, and is a security kind of mechanism that could not be mixed together with construction activities. And that was necessary, and that was carried out and completed, and construction works resumed without further delay. And as we speak, and as I've already said, construction works have been going on despite even the COVID-19 issue. Yes.
When you talk about, the first, the second, and the 3 baths, I mean, your estimation was that the delivery of these 3 baths was supposed to be done in the financial year 2017-2018. Here we are in the year 2020, almost in the middle of the year. You're still talking about the second and the third bath, at a completion stage of about 60%. Do you have a firm timeline of when you expect the delivery of the second, of the other 2 baths? And number 2, how have you managed to cover for cost overruns, bearing in mind that it's now almost 3 years?
Yes, we do understand the issues that are surrounding this particular project. And at the onset, to begin from the side of the cost overruns, because this is again is associated with the timelines which you are alluding to. It was observed that there was it was necessary to address the issues of project cost, and the government did act proactively to discuss this with the contractor on the need to keep what we can call fixed rates for the project. And the big plus for us on this project is that this is a project that is fully financed by the government of Kenya. And being a fully government financed project, it was possible to discuss with the contractor to make sure that we were not going to run into problems in the future, because it is being funded through annual voting of funds during the budget process. So it also having been cognizant of the fact that you can meet a challenge in the course of devoting funds, it was necessary to discuss this with the contractors to make sure that we kept the costs at original, cost parameters. And this is the case with this particular project. And going now to the issue of the time overruns. Definitely, there have been challenges with the time. And the COVID issue has not equally been easy because we are currently running at the level of construction that we were found at when the COVID issue struck, which means we cannot upscale, even if we wanted to upscale. So it means, therefore, that we'll have to do with the delays that will be caused by the COVID situation. Yes.
What is the likely impact of what I would call the double whammy of insecurity, delays, and COVID-related delays?
Security hasn't caused a delay as such.
But it has a little bit.
No, I wouldn't comment on that because we have not been able to get any quantifiable effect caused by security issues.
But you have just said that the contractor was at some point forced to stop work temporarily. And this was not the first time.
Yes, that temporary stoppage was not over a long period of time. And at the same time, upon resumption, the contractor increased their delivery process in terms of, if you go to Lama Port, you'll find that a number of times they work using more than one shift. So that enabled the contractor to be able to, to manage issues of delays that could have been caused. At the planning stage, the contractor had planned with maybe just one major shift. But at the delivery level, considering that the site is well secured, then it was necessary to have more than one shift so that we could manage issues of time. And these are project management strategies to deal with with the issues of time overruns. Yes.
Since the breaking ground of the lapset project, back in the year 2012, we know Isiolo International Airport has been completed. We know the Moyale Highway is almost done.
It's done.
It's actually done. We know the first bath has been completed. There are other projects that are still yet to kick off or at a different stage of implementation. And I'm talking about, the construction of the Garissa Highway, the Lamu-Malindi Highway as well. Are you satisfied with the rate of progress 8 years down the line?
OBrien, I can confidently say that we are satisfied with the level at which we are making progress, all factors being considered. And as we speak, the other road that you've not mentioned is the road between Lokicha, passing through Lodwar to the border of Kenya and South Sudan at Nakodok. The construction of that road is also ongoing. So we are equally delivering our connecting road with the South Sudan. We've already completed the design and the preparatory works for the section between Lamu, Garissa and Isiolo. And the government is working on mechanisms for funding that particular link. However, the rider is, while you might think that we are not constructing that section, the government also put in place mechanisms for addressing what we can also call the enhanced offtake route, as well as creating a wider access to Lama Port beyond one route. So we have the other route that goes through Garsen. That is the Lamu, Witu, Garsen, then Garsen, Hola to Garissa. That route is currently under construction. I mean reconstruction or rehabilitation. It's more or less complete. And we also have another road construction that is that has also just been completed. That is the section between Garissa Madogo, and Modagashe. The government has completed that particular road. And so we are remaining with a section between Modagashe and Isiolo, which is a Maram road, but motorable. So a lot of efforts are being made by the government to make sure that the lapset corridor is accessed through various routes, and to create an enabling environment for Kenyans to be able to invest in the lapset corridor. So it's not just doing a road that enables us to move cargo from Lama Port to South Sudan or to Ethiopia and forgetting about the Kenyan investment scenario. We are looking at a situation of opening up northern Kenya for investments. Hence, the government program that has been putting up all these other access routes to enable us to open up northern Kenya.
I mean, when you look at investment that has been made in lapset, I mean, it is over 100 billion shillings. The first bath is complete, but there's no business going on there because some other critical infrastructure are yet to be put in place, like roads and so much. And we have even seen Kenya Ports Authority, you know, going forward and offering what you'd call incentive to business people to use the port. But the question they have been asking is, it's all right, we can use the Lama Port for transshipment business, but to where?
That's a good question. Mr. Bryan, you will recall that we are not existing in an island. And Africa is not an island in the global maritime business. In fact, if you are to consider Kenya's Lamu as an island, then you would better learn from Singapore, why it is doing business, and yet it's a drop in the ocean. What we are trying to talk about here is a strategic location at a global level, at an African continental level, even before you can just talk about East African level. We are talking about a strategic location, and that is also found within routes that are supplying different parts of the globe. And in terms of looking at the functionality of Lamu, you know very well that cargo coming to Africa is today taken to the Middle East for breaking of bulk.
Also Dubai.
Yes, Dubai, Salalah. Those are the ports where you know, bulk is broken, among many other ports in Europe and elsewhere. So when that happens, that Africa's cargo has to be taken, even if it comes from China and passes from the East Coast, it has to go elsewhere for breaking of bulk. Then you quickly realize that Lamu has potential if you are to provide more superior facilities, the way we have done now. And basically, straight away when we start business, you will realize that cargo that needs to come into Africa, particularly the east coast of the African continent, and even other cargo that might be destined specifically for the Middle East, among many other areas, could actually be broken at Lamu. Then you have the African cargo being distributed by medium-sized ships. Because the Lama Port, as you do know, is a large scale, it's a mega port, about 18 meters depth at the key point, and as well as 400 meters long of a key port length. So what we are saying is that the berthing facilities at Lamu are superior facilities compared to many other ports in Africa. In fact, on the east coast of the African continent, it is the best so far that we can talk about.
So this is a project for the future, simply put.
I think sometimes we underrate the present by thinking that good things can only work for the future. Once commissioned for operations, I can assure you that Lamu will start to play its role.
What are we waiting for? I mean, but the one is there, it's lying idle.
It's not lying idle.
It's not doing any business.
No, it is settling.
But the globally acceptable settling period for that kind of an infrastructure would be about 6 months. Now we are talking almost 1 year.
No. You are not right. You are not right. It's not yet even 6 months since that was completed. It's not yet 6 months.
From October last year?
You are talking about the completion of the berthing area, the quay. That was the port quay. The port quay was ready then, but the yard itself was completed more or less into the new year.
Into the new year.
Yeah, so that is the area that we are still talking about. And this is May. So we are still well within the settling period. And even if I was to take your timeline.
Let's talk about Isiolo International Airport. Completed, lying idle.
At this COVID time, yes, you can talk about challenges. There were flights that were operating there.
Once
yes, there is always a start. You don't expect a new airport to start having, numerous flights as we continue to open up that particular part of the country. But by the mere fact that there was a flight operating with a level of economic return to it in itself and operating to northern Kenya, which a lot of people still take for granted, it is in itself an achievement. And it is itself something that tells us about the potential of that area. It is in itself something that tells us about the people of that area. That there we have people who can participate in the opening up of northern Kenya for socioeconomic growth and development going forward.
We started talking about, lapset almost 10 years ago now.
Right.
If somebody was to ask you, what has lapset delivered to Kenya since we started talking about it, what would be your response?
Number one, the lapset has changed the face of Kenya's investment space. Previously, people thought that investing in Kenya was basically investing in Nairobi or Mombasa or anywhere along the Nairobi-Mombasa line. But we have since undertaken a number of project preparatory activities, a number of investment studies that have enabled the entire globe to understand that the lapset corridor is an investment area, and as such, Kenya has expanded its investment space. The investment menu has since increased with the lapset corridor program. You are aware that as we've been speaking about the crude oil pipeline from Turkana being designed to Destiny in Lamu, you do know that there have been a lot of investment discussions. There have been a lot of investors who have been partaking in this particular discussion, as well as many other investment actions.
It cannot be denied that we are behind schedule, in terms of project implementation, and this can be associated by multiple factors, from insecurity to COVID-19 to funds and so much. But the world is not waiting for us. Look at what is happening with our neighbors here. Somalia, through the United Arab Emirates, they are putting up a modern port, which is almost 50% complete. Look at Eritrea. They're also doing the same. And all these is all geared to grab a piece of the business pie that's dominate the greater horn of Africa. The question is this: how do we plan to accelerate the projects earmarked under lapset to ensure that we don't get into the fray too late to find nothing actually on the plate?
The rapid rise in infrastructure projects of the nature of ports, among many others, this is something that is not just happening in a haphazard manner. In the first place, the African Union already solidified and crystallized the deliverables for African countries. Regarding ports, it has already been observed that there is a need to develop an added capacity for ports at about 1.3 billion tons per year.
For the African continent.
For the African continent.
Yeah.
Which therefore means that the existing ports are barely scratching the surface in terms of
serious undercapacity.
Yes. So the racing by various countries to build ports in Africa is not just a matter of competing internally for a small pie. But it is indeed the awakening, the realization that the African continent is fast becoming a global platform for investments, for logistics, for trade, among many other things. And looking at even the future of industrialization around the globe, Africa is already being seen as the next global growth frontier for industries. And when you hear us talking about Lama Port, Lamu Industrial City, special economic zones along the corridor, among many others, we are not building them in the small fashion that people are thinking about Kenya trying to cater for itself. But we are actually ready to bite the global business pie, which is already seen to be quite big, that is destined for Africa. So the preparedness, the level of preparedness along the east coast of the African continent is not something that is just simply competing with the Lama Port or competing with Kenyan ports.
We are competing with the world.
We are competing with the world, and it's a kind of a global preparedness for ourselves, for East Africa, for Africa, and taking note of the fact that we have the new agreement for the continental free trade area. We are equally preparing ourselves to be able to be the center for continental logistics as we serve the rest of the globe from Africa.
In short, these are not projects for the 47 or 48 million Kenyans. No. These are projects for the 1+ billion people in Africa, and of course the 7 billion people in the world.
Yes. From development planners' perspective, that is the place to invest into now, going forward.
That's the Kenya of the future.
That is the Kenya of the future. If I take you a little bit out of the continent, to give you a quick example, India in 1980s was at where Kenya is today, and they were asking themselves, how do we prime India to become a global growth platform for industries, manufacturing, healthcare, medicine, everything, mention it, services. Then they said they needed to do a proper plan. And their plan for pushing India beyond the 80s was called building the second India. The India they had at that time was not going to deliver them to the next level. But they realized they needed to prime India to be a new India, in which India was going to have a rebirth. What lapset corridor is doing to Kenya, to East Africa, and to Africa is that it's creating a rebirth. It's an economic rebirth. It's a socio-economic rebirth. This is what I mean by us seeing the big picture in lapset, rather than thinking that it's just the building of a port and a road, and then we say we are okay.
It's a more complicated project.
It's a more complicated project, and it's not just a mere project for building infrastructure alone, because infrastructure is not built unto its own self, but it is built as an enabler to spur other sectors of the economy, to grow them. You will see population dynamics. I'm happy that you are at a stage of your life when you will be able to see more. We will be able to see more of the lapset corridor, attracting bigger populations going forward.
Thank you so much indeed for your time, and we look forward for a beautiful Kenya. You have heard it all from him. This has been Inside Government. Thank you for your time. We do this again on Thursday, the same time, right here on KBC Channel 1. My name is OBrien. Thank you for your time. All the best.
All right.